Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to the Sports Spectrum podcast. I'm Jason Romano. We really appreciate you tuning in, checking us out here. You can download our podcast on Apple iTunes Podcast, on Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere podcasts are found. Leave a review on Apple iTunes, a great way to get the word out about this podcast, the stories of the intersection of sports and faith. Today's guest on the podcast is Minnesota Twins pitcher Kyle Gibson. And before I tell you about Kyle and why we have him on the podcast today, I just want to encourage you to go to sportspectrum.com. We have so much great content there on the intersection of sports and faith, daily devotionals, articles, first-person articles written by athletes, including players like Kyle Gibson, but also our magazine, which has been around for 30-plus years, and it's really the staple and the foundation of what Sports Spectrum was founded on, and it's still there. And it's a quarterly magazine. It's 4 issues. It's a really great magazine, I promise you that. And we've slashed the price. It's literally $18, just $18 for an entire year subscription. $18. It's less than $2 a month. And you get the quarterly magazine of Sports Spectrum. Plus you get a couple bonus issues, including a welcome magazine. Just a great outreach tool, a great tool to give to your kids, to youth groups, to men's ministries, to churches. It's awesome. It really is. And there's something still, I like about holding a magazine in your hand and reading it. Really cool pictures, lots of big pictures, like lots of great stories. Just love I was a magazine guy as a kid, and I love the Sports Spectrum magazine. So I want to encourage you to subscribe. $18, go to sportspectrum.com and subscribe today for just $18. It's a great deal. Today's guest on the podcast is Kyle Gibson, Minnesota Twins pitcher. Kyle was on the podcast back last year with his then teammate, Brian Dozier, longtime teammate with the Twins, on episode 61, which you can go back and listen to right here on the app that you're listening to this podcast on. But then Brian was dealt to the Dodgers on July 31st of this year. And so the Dodgers, of course, have now gone on to make it to the World Series and facing the Boston Red Sox. And Kyle is familiar with the Red Sox as well, because Kyle's best game that he pitched in 2018 was at Fenway Park, July 26th, against the Boston Red Sox. He went 8 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 7 strikeouts, and beat the Red Sox 2-1 and getting the W there. So Kyle is familiar with pitching against Boston. He's certainly familiar with Brian Dozier on the Dodgers, and I thought it would be fun to get him on the podcast to preview the World Series a little bit, tell us what it's like to pitch at Fenway Park, which is where Game 1 of the World Series kicks off tonight, being Tuesday night. We're just taping this podcast today and then releasing it right after we finish taping it. I also talked to Kyle about his season, where he had a career low ERA of 3.62 and a career high in innings pitched, 196, and in strikeouts, 179. And then I wanted to ask Kyle about giving back. He's a part of the Big League Impact program that was founded by Adam Wainwright, and just doing great things, trying to build a school in Haiti and raising money and raising funds. And Kyle has been an awesome advocate for that and for Big League Impact. So we talk about giving back as well. I think you guys will love hearing from Kyle Gibson, the Minnesota Twins pitcher. It's great to welcome him back to the podcast right here on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. Kyle, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me back on, man.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. I know it's the off season. Well, the beginning of the off season. The season's been over now for a few weeks, and the World Series kicks off actually tonight. And the last time we talked to you was in the off season last year. Obviously, this year wasn't as successful, finishing second to the Twins and missing the postseason after what happened last year. But the Twins did finish strong, winning their last 6. You won 10 games. You had a career low 3.62 ERA, a career high in innings pitched and strikeouts. Classify your 2018 season. Break it down for us. How would you, as you look back now, and you've been a few weeks away from wearing a uniform, how would you look back at your season?
Yeah, it was interesting. Similarly to whenever a team kind of struggles, it is a little bit harder to really kind of enjoy a little bit of a successful season. I watched Brian Dozier have to do it a couple years ago when he hit 40 homers, and it's just not quite as fun. So I enjoyed getting the chance to pitch 32 times and thankful to be healthy. And thankful that, I was able to throw a little bit more consistent, which is, what we're always trying to go for. But definitely have bigger goals in mind of getting back to the postseason and hopefully making a deep run here soon.
I was doing my research, just looking at your stats, and it was a weird one when it came up. You're 2 for 2. You led the team in hitting this year, 1,000%. Perfect. I mean, is that something you want to start doing more of?
A little bit smaller sample size, but yes, I wouldn't mind hitting a little bit more. I only got to do that once in interleague play, so if we could line my starts up with a couple more interleague starts, that'd be great.
Now, what I didn't mention in the very beginning, which I should have said, was happy birthday to you. Today is your 31st birthday. Very excited for watching you, in your career. So happy birthday to you. And I know the last time that we chatted on the podcast, it was episode 61, and it had you and it had your longtime teammate, as you mentioned earlier, Brian Dozier. And then on July 31st, Dozier is dealt to the Dodgers, and now he gets his chance to play tonight. And throughout this World Series 2018 here between the Dodgers and the Red Sox. And yes, it's a part of the business of the game, and we hear that a lot. But how tough was that for you to watch your teammate and friend go to another team?
Yeah, that was one of the tough ones. Between him, Escobar, and Presley, I lost 3 of the 4 teammates that had been on the team my entire career. So that was kind of a tough trade deadline for everybody. And but that one was tough. That was actually one of my start days, and I rushed into the field to kind of catch him about 5 minutes before he had to head out to LA. But he's a guy that I appreciate all of his friendship and being such a good teammate, and he's just a great guy and really treats people the right way.
Have you had a chance to talk to him just maybe in the month of October or even in the last couple of days as he's getting ready to play in the World Series and kind of just encourage him a little bit?
Oh yeah, we've been texting back and forth and giving him a hard time about things here and there, and just wishing him luck for sure. Try to watch as much as we can, and it's been fun to get to see him have fun on this stage because he's played for 6 years now, and this is the first time he's gotten there. So really happy for him.
Let's do a little World Series preview here. I know it was interesting looking back on 2018, and it's hard to look back at positives, I guess, or good things when your team wasn't as successful as you would have liked. But you pitched against Boston twice this season and had some success. June 21st at home, you went 6 innings, gave up 7 hits, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts, and a loss. But then July 26th at Fenway, you pitched your best game of the year, 8 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 7 strikeouts, and get the W in a 2-1 win. As the world gets ready to watch this game tonight in this series between LA and Boston, tell me what Los Angeles is in for with this Red Sox lineup, because you faced them twice.
Yeah, I don't know, not really sure how that all shaked out with, throwing a couple of good games against them, but, those were a couple more fun ones, and that one in Fenway might have been, one of the most fun starts I've ever had. But you know what? They're a team that is not wanting to strike out, and they're a team that puts the ball in play in the big situations, and they will strike out, but they put the ball in play in the big situations, and they're just really good with 2 strikes. So you have to – sometimes you can kind of get yourself in bad counts, even after 0-2, 1-2 counts. You can get yourself in a bad situation by, wasting a couple pitches out of the zone trying to chase the strikeout. So, you really just have to execute pitches in and then just out of the strike zone and, hopefully be ahead of them in the count so you can kind of dictate, what pitch you want to throw and where you want to throw it.
When you're pitching against a team like Boston, in your mind, because you do your scouting report, obviously you do your homework and you know who you're facing, and then you got guys on there like Mookie Betts and others who it's not surprising when they come to the plate who they are. Is it literally a game plan with every single batter, and it's different for every single batter, or do you stick to your game plan as far as making the pitches that you need to make? Does that make sense in the question I'm asking?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a combination of both. You have to find a game plan that allows you to utilize your strengths against each hitter. So it is definitely hitter to hitter, but so it's not going to be the same for each hitter. But I mean, some pitchers can only do so many things, in specific ways. So I'm one of those guys. So I mean, even though I really like, elevating a lot of fastballs, that's just not something I do really well. So I have to pick and choose my times to do that, and really kind of set that pitch up and use it differently than, maybe say a Bueller guy for the Dodgers does, where he does it really well and then throws his curveball off of it. But, I think you definitely have to have a plan for every hitter, and because there's different zones that you can, get guys out more consistently, and there's different pitches in those zones that you can get guys out more consistently. So, they'll sit down and they'll come up with a pretty comprehensive plan for each guy, and figure out which guy they don't want to let them beat them, and which guy you can kind of get away with more pitches in what locations.
We're talking to Kyle Gibson here, the Minnesota Twins pitcher on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Kyle, Fenway Park, such a historic venue. Game 1 there tonight, game 2 Wednesday night. What's it like to pitch there? Just describe that and kind of maybe even your first memories going into Fenway, right?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was the first game I pitched there, but one of my other favorite starts that I've ever had is in Fenway. I think it was against John Lackey, and I think Lackey went eight or 9 innings, 1 run, and I think I might have gone 8 innings, 1 or 2 runs, and I think we went into the 10th, and we ended up losing the game. But it's one of those places where they sing "Sweet Caroline" in the bottom of the 8th inning, and a couple times I've been lucky enough to be on the mound and listening to 40,000 Strong sing "Sweet Caroline." So there's certain nuances about that park like that really create some memories that stick out, and a lot of fun baseball memories.
You play in a brand new stadium, if you will, over the last few years in Minnesota, and then Boston, which is a park and field that's been around since, gosh, I think 1914 or something ridiculous like that. So describe the differences, like in a clubhouse, and what it's like walking in there compared to certainly your home field, which is an incredible atmosphere in Minnesota. You guys were so good this year at home. Yeah. But just describe the sort of differences in a place like Fenway to a place like Target Field.
Well, the clubhouses are stark differences. They were built 100 years ago and have had some updates, but nowhere near what we have at home at Target Field. But even the on-field stuff kind of creates some differences, but both of them are good. I think from a fan perspective, there's probably more seats that are pretty close to the field at Target Field, and obviously less seats with obstructive views of metal poles that were built 100 years ago. But you get to really enjoy Fenway when you're there. So there's a lot of bonuses and a lot of good things about both of those parks.
Do you ever allow yourself to kind of walk around, not as a fan, obviously, because you're a player, but just kind of say, you know what, I'm just going to kind of take a tour of this place and really kind of, a place like Fenway or Wrigley or any of those places?
Oh, yeah. One of the first things I did when we went to Wrigley this year, and we only go there like once every 7 or 8 years or something. So when I got to Wrigley, I went and stood behind home plate and just took a little video of kind of looking around the stadium, and have seen it from the left field bleachers, and have been to a game there, but have never been on the field and looking around. But that's definitely something that you do whenever you get to places for the first time. And I was able to go up on the Green Monster when I played in the Cape League in college, so I've been up there. But you definitely try to look around and enjoy the views that fans really get to enjoy.
All right. I know I kind of asked you this beforehand, before we started taping, about a prediction for the World Series. I actually asked it this way. I said, are you allowed to make a prediction? And you were like, yeah, of course. So let's hear it. Because some players are like, I don't want to make a prediction. I have friends on both teams. I'm not playing in the game. I've heard it from different sides of the angles on all perspectives throughout my career covering sports. So for you, what's your prediction? Let's hear it.
Well, I think any team is going to struggle against Boston if their offense does what they did against Houston. Houston has such a good pitching rotation and pitching staff that, to put up those runs consistently against that staff was pretty impressive. And if they keep hitting like that, they're going to be really tough to beat. But if the Dodgers are able to keep it, 3-2, 2-1, low-scoring ball games, I really like their chances. everybody's kind of utilizing starting pitching at different times in the bullpen, which is really never, I don't know that we've seen this many starters come out of the pen on a regular basis. So I think it'll be a fun series, and I think the lower scoring it is, the Dodgers have a better chance. If it's a high scoring series, I kind of like Boston.
Okay. So you still kind of went both sides there, but that's all right. You didn't exactly make a prediction.
I went both sides. I can see it play out both ways. I would like for the Dodgers to win because of Brian Dozier being on there and being able to root for him. He was my daughter's favorite player almost when he was on the Twins. So I don't even think I was her favorite player, but he's a guy that my daughter would love to see win. So hopefully they can do it.
There you go. We'll root for Brian, and certainly he was on the podcast, so we'll keep an eye on him for sure. Okay, a couple questions left I want to ask you real quick, and I know these have nothing to do with the World Series, but this is a faith and sports podcast. Part of your faith is giving back and helping others, and it was such a good year for you on the field, but off the field you did some great work too through Big League Impact. Can you share some of what you were a part of raising funds to help those in need this year? And I know you got an event coming up on November 3rd in St. Louis that you're a part of as well.
Yeah, that the yearly strikeout and home run campaign we did this year with Zach Duke, Logan Morrison, and Brian Dozier was just something that I never had done, but it turned out to be such a really cool experience. And we've done the Fantasy Football League the last 4 years here, and we were really searching for something that could allow some different fans and more fans to get involved. So Doge and Lomo donated for every homer they hit and then allowed fans to match it. And then Duke and I donated for every strikeout and asked fans to match it. And we're trying to help an organization called Help One Now build a secondary school in Cap-Haitian, Haiti in Ferrier Village. It'll be the first school that'll service 8th grade through 12th grade. Really of its kind down there, and it's just going to impact hopefully around 800 kids a year, and it's just going to be really cool. I think it's going to be finished in January or December, and we're going to try to take a trip down there and check it out. So I got to thank the fans of Minnesota. And fans all over the country really. They really helped us out and stepped up, and hopefully they had fun being involved.
Now you got this event for those listening. I know it's November 3rd. I was looking it up, and it's called Kyle Gibson's Big League Blast Clay Shoot. Tell us about that, and maybe if people are in the area, how they can participate and be a part of it.
Yeah, so we're doing a clay shooting tournament, and really something that we hadn't done before. But a lot of people like to do it here around Thanksgiving time, and so it's kind of like skeet or trap shooting, and you come out and set up similar to a golf tournament. And you come out and shoot some clay birds and walk around the course a little bit and have a little bit of fun. And it's going to be benefiting a group called Crisis Aid International, a local St. Louis group. And we're going to be helping them with a school feeding and after-school feeding program that they do to kind of bridge the food gap over the weekend for about 800 kids that are all living under the poverty line. So once again, I think it's definitely a really worthy cause, and Crisis Aid does a lot to really help the St. Louis area.
Tell us where people can find out more information, and explain a little bit too about there's going to be other players there. And so if you sign up, you get to kind of hang out with you guys too. It's not this thing where it's just a charity thing that you're going money, but your guys are going to be at this event. So tell us who's going to be there and then where people can sign up.
Yeah, so that was kind of my goal going into it, was try to have an event that, I can use, some of the connections that my wife and I have made through the game. And we'll have guys like, Adam Wainwright, Lance Lynn, Zach Duke. Hopefully Doge is able to make it after the World Series, but just bring in some guys and create a similar type of atmosphere like a golf outing, but just have it at a little different outing. So people can find information and sign up at bigleagueimpact.org, and then click on my profile there, and all the information's posted up there, and it should be a lot of fun.
I love that. So again, the website is bigleagueimpact.org. Check it out. Kyle Gibson's Big League Blast Clay Shoot, doing great work there. Let me just ask you this real quick, and then I got my final question for you. How does your faith impact why you do things like this, like the school in Haiti? Tell me about, I know your faith is strong, and we shared that on the last podcast about where that was rooted from, but how does that impact why you're doing what you're doing in terms of charity and giving back?
Well, my wife and I have just been put in a situation and blessed to be in a situation where playing Major League Baseball for the last 5 years, and we just have the resources to hopefully have an impact and to do some kingdom work and have that type of impact, and we've been given so much, and the love that we have through Christ and how that impacts our life. We're just trying to be good stewards of where He's put us, and I think there's more verses in the Bible about money than there are about a lot of things, and how you're supposed to use it and how you're supposed to steward it, and that's just what we're trying to do. We're trying to steward the funds that God's blessed us with, and try to have an impact around St. Louis and hopefully around the world, and just try to show people the love of Christ and let Him shine through us.
Kyle Gibson's been our guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Last question, Kyle. Usually the question I ask on the podcast is, what are you learning from the Lord right now? Which is kind of the question that I'm going to ask. But maybe it's been different for you because this season was different than last season versus the year before. So what are you learning from the Lord, or what did you learn from the Lord this season that maybe was a little different from previous years? What did He teach you?
Yeah, I read a book, Golf's Sacred Journey, the 7 Days at the Links of Utopia, and it was a book that is a fictional story written by David Cook, a sports psychologist, and it really looks at the mental side of golf, which has so many parallels to baseball. And toward the end, which this part is the part that really stuck with me, toward the end, he has this golfer, write down the lies that the world tells him about himself and what he believes about himself, like his golf score is really important and determines his worth and stuff like that. And then he has him write down the truths that he needs to believe about himself and that God says about him. And that was something that I really struggled with last year and was able to kind of carry into this year. And reading that book this year really kind of affirmed that and just really tried to help me keep my priorities in line and keep the mental side of baseball in line and understand what's really important, and try to not get caught up in one start here and there, and try to not get caught up in believing that your ERA is more important than it really is.
He is Kyle Gibson. That's good stuff there. Kyle Gibson, a Minnesota Twins pitcher, joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Game 1 of the World Series kicks off first pitch tonight in Boston at Fenway Park. We'll be rooting for Brian Dozier, of course, his former teammate, playing with the Dodgers, and hopefully watching a long series that goes 7 games. And Kyle, thanks for joining us here on the podcast, and I'll see you, I guess, next month, and hope you're doing great, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Thanks to Kyle Gibson again for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. I think we got a prediction out of him. He kind of danced around a little bit with the Boston-LA dynamic, but I think he's pulling for the Dodgers for his friend Brian Dozier, and certainly it sounds like his daughter's favorite player is also Brian Dozier. So we'll be watching this World Series tonight for sure, and over the next week or so, Boston and Los Angeles. I'll give you my prediction. I don't normally do predictions on the podcast, but I live in the Northeast. I live in Red Sox land, basically, between Boston and New York. A lot of Yankees fans and Red Sox fans here. I live in Connecticut. And they've been awesome. I mean, they've been great the whole year, winning 108 games. It's hard to pick against Boston. And, I'll certainly be rooting for Brian Dozier as well with the Dodgers. But I think Boston, they got a good, just amazing offense and a lot of right-handed bats that can hit the ball far. And I know the Dodgers have some lefties that they can throw at Boston, but the Red Sox offense is what carried them all year. And I think they have just enough pitching to beat the Dodgers. I'll say they beat them in 6. So they'll win this World Series in 6 games, Boston over Los Angeles. It's going to be a fun one. I look forward to watching it. I love baseball. I'm a big fan of baseball and certainly watching great teams. I love the Boston-LA dynamic, certainly the rivalry there between the Celtics and the Lakers. So it'll be a lot of fun. I'm thinking Boston in 6 games in the 2018 World Series. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Again, we want to encourage you, subscribe to the magazine. It's $18 for an entire year. It's an amazing deal. You can do that over at sportsspectrum.com, sportsspectrum.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Sports Spectrum podcast.